You are Locked On Braves POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Braves POSTCAST, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Grant McAuley alongside Jake Mastroianni after a good night of baseball for the Atlanta Braves and a crazy day of trades across Major League Baseball. The trade deadline has come and gone. The Braves made a deal. You probably know the names who came over, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go forward, what it means for this club. And, of course, we got to talk a little bit about evening up the series with the Milwaukee Brewers. Thanks to some early offense and some very nice pitching from Bryce Elder, the Braves were able to do just that with their 5-1 victory. We'll talk all about that. Of course, get you set up for the series finale with Chris Sale on the mound tomorrow. Before we get started with any of that, though, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube, and Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcasts. We appreciate you making us your first listen of every day. And today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnMLB, for a first deposit match of up to $100. Jake, the bats got going early. Bryce Elder settled in, put up a really great start, and the Braves were the beneficiaries of all of those things coming together for a 5-1 victory on a day in which they had a reunion or two all in one trade.
Yeah, big day for the Atlanta Braves. You know, the trade deadline coming and going. Not much done, but y'all are bringing back a familiar face to help boost the lineup. And then the lineup goes out and collects 14 hits and gets a win to even up this series. So all in all, a good day for the Braves.
They must have just heard that Jorge Solair was on his way, because that's the man we're going to talk a lot more about. But, of course, not much of an effect on this game in particular, other than I will say, Jake, and we'll get into the trade thing. We'll kind of sprinkle this conversation in as we go. But when a team knows that it needs a little bit of reinforcements for this fight down the stretch, the general manager, the front office wants to go out there and do just that. Alex Anthopoulos pretty pleased with the deal with the San Francisco Giants to bring over Jorge Solair, to add Luke Jackson back to the bullpen. It did cost him Tyler Matzik, a postseason hero himself. So a very surreal, a very odd trade, but ultimately one that should help the Braves check a little box or two, and especially the one in offense, which has needed all the help it can get and seems to be getting somebody who can come in and maybe help spark a few more nights like this.
Certainly hope so. Obviously trying to recapture some magic from 2021, but Solair, and from all reports, it sounds like a guy that the Braves have really wanted for the last couple of years. They've tried to get him. So they obviously think very highly of him, the person that he is in the clubhouse, and also what he can do on the field with the big power. But I think probably most importantly is that on-base ability that he has. In 2021, when he came over, he kind of took over that leadoff spot because he was able to get on base and bring the power. Didn't have the speed aspect of a Ronald Acuna Jr., but, somebody that can get on base for those guys in the middle. And that's kind of what's been missing. And, Jarred Kelenic had a big day today we'll talk about, and he's done a fine job there, but not necessarily somebody that's a high on base guy. So getting somebody like Solair that this team's very familiar with, and somebody who's been really good, especially since the start of June after a slow month or a slow start of the season. We know a lot of hitters had a slow starts to this year, but certainly somebody that's going to help this Braves offense get going.
Yeah, I think so. And when you look at what Jarred Kelenic did on this night, on base, 4 times, a couple of walks, a couple of hits, belted a home run in front of a contingent of his family and friends up there in Wisconsin. That had to feel pretty nice for him. This was a night that he'd been looking for a while. He's punctuating the month of July, which has been a forgettable one for him, with a nice performance like this. And I think, Jake, in some ways, maybe a subtle reminder that there may be some highs and lows, but there's still a lot that Jarred Kelenic can have to offer over the next couple of months.
Certainly. And, he is that guy this year that we were looking at is, can he be that outfielder, that left fielder of the future? And, looked really, really good, obviously, in this one. And that month stretch after Acuna went down, I mean, he was really, him and Ozuna were the two big bats in this offense for a while. Now he's cooled off since then a good bit, and, he's getting this everyday opportunity. This trade deadline, he's probably, him and like a lot of other guys were thinking about it too. Are they going to lose playing time out of this? What's going to happen? Obviously Kelenic's in there with Michael Harris out, but I think this may take a little bit of pressure off of him now if you have to move him out of that leadoff spot where there's been so much asked of him. But a great game for him in this one, able to pull the ball down the line for a hit, and then that swing the other way. I know it just got over the field over the wall in left field, but that was just a great swing from him. Sounded really good off the bat, so I was happy that left the yard for him, be able to do that in front of his family after what was a rough night for him on Monday. Had a couple of lapses in the outfield, and again, the offensive struggles have been there for him here recently. So great signs for Kelenic, who, like you said, still a guy that has a very bright future, and we've seen signs of it this year. And so hopefully he can just have some more consistency down the stretch.
Yeah, I remember having this conversation with Matt Olson a year ago where it's you're never as good as you are on your best day. You're never as bad as you are on your worst day. For Jarred Kelenic, it was kind of a study in duality there because he did have a forgettable Monday, particularly in the field, comes back out in game 2 of this series and makes his presence known, gets on base 4 times out of the leadoff spot, a spot that he is likely to cede to Jorge Solair beginning on Wednesday. But either way, there's still, I think, some important at-bats ahead for Jarred Kelenic in this season. We can unpack the trade deadline as we go along here a little bit more. The deal that makes the Braves better, of course, by bringing over Solair and Luke Jackson. But as for Tuesday in Milwaukee, the offense got going early. It backed up Bryce Elder, who was up from the minors, had been the 27th man in that doubleheader, where we talked about that game was kind of a mixed bag because he had a ton of strikeouts, but he also gave up some runs. On this night, he was able to pick up his strikeouts and really kept the Brewers off balance throughout the course of this start all the way into the 7th inning.
Yeah, for him and Schwellenbach both in that Cardinals series, they threw the ball really well, but they gave up a ton of home runs. And in this one, Elder did a much better job of keeping the ball down. We talk about it all the time with Elder. He has the stuff and he has the potential to be a really solid pitcher in a big league rotation, but it is a very fine line for him, even more so than Schwellenbach, who has the velocity to get away with some of that stuff that Elder, just doesn't have the ability to blow it by hitters. But when he's on, and he has the movement on those pitches and that slider that was especially really good for him tonight, he can have performances like this. And we've seen it. It was not a small sample size. When you go back from the end of the 2022 season through, half of the 2023 season, he was really, really good at the big league level. So I'm still very much a believer in Bryce Elder. Don't necessarily think he's an all-star, but I think he's somebody that really could be a solid pitcher at the back of a rotation. And this isn't easy for him. And Snicker talked about it after the game when you're having to come up and you go down, you don't know when you're going to start. You're on the taxi squad. Are you going to pitch, in this doubleheader? What's it going to be? And that cannot be easy for a guy that's, obviously all baseball players are so used to routine. So great to see him come out here and put up an effort like this. And look, it could be spots for you to get more opportunities as the rest of the season goes along.
And I've always thought this with starting pitchers, they may be creatures of habit more than any other group of baseball players, any other position group. And they like their routines. And it is a little bit jarring to have to maybe get scratched here, wait an extra day, catch a flight, run out there with, maybe limited preparation for that particular day, or just maybe not having had the time to really wrap your head around, okay, well, where's my next starting assignment? It's going to be about this group, and just kind of work your way in there. But starts like this obviously go a long way towards building the confidence for Bryce Elder. And you have to imagine that he's going to have some opportunities down the stretch as the Braves continue to try to work their starting rotation to give extra rest where they can and where they need to. Even if they got some good news in the starting pitching front we can get to later, that they're going to have to dip into their pitching depth, and they believe that they have enough. And obviously at the trade deadline, they did not go out and get another starter, though that discussion a little bit more nuanced because, Jake, some of the prices of these starting pitchers seem to be pretty astronomical, and we're not talking about the top names in baseball going every which way on this trade deadline Tuesday.
Yeah, you're looking at a Trevor Rogers from the Marlins that brought back, 2 top 100 prospects essentially at one point or another. And it's just the prices for starting pitching in particular were just really, really high. Eric Betty is the one that I really thought the Braves could go after. He ends up going to the Cardinals in a 3-team deal. But the prices for starting pitching were just, as you said, astronomical. And Alex Anthopoulos is not somebody that's going to overpay for anything. We've seen it in free agency. We've seen it in trades. He is just not a general manager that is going to overpay no matter what the market says. And we talked about it. This was a seller's market. There were so many teams buying. I've never seen so many moves happen at a trade deadline. There were moves almost every 5 minutes the last couple of days. So many teams were active, but there just weren't a lot of teams that were selling, driving up the prices of some of these players. So I think that's one reason why we didn't see the Braves go get starting pitching. The other reason being you did get good reports on Fried and Lopez, and you're hoping to get them back soon.
Yeah, we'll talk more about those good reports a little bit later. Another good thing for the Braves is all the slugging they've been doing here lately. 14 home runs over the last 5 games. Jarred Kelenic went deep on his 2-hit and 4 on-base night, or 4 times on-base night that he had on Tuesday. That's his 12th home run of the year for the Braves. So 14 homers in their last 5 games. A lot of these things have been solo. Maybe that'll begin to change soon. But, all of a sudden, it just seems like the Braves offense has, at least from a power perspective, started to gain some steam. Now, if they can just string some hits together, work some counts, maybe do a little bit more of that on-base thing, this lineup could be, a click or two away from getting going. And I don't think getting Jorge Solair is going to do anything but help.
We've been sitting here waiting, hoping all year long, and just continuing to say this offense has the ability. They can get it going. We know what they're capable of, and we just haven't seen it. And look, at this point, it's going to take, 10, 15 game stretch for us to really believe anything, just because we've been fooled before this season. But I'll say it again, the talent is there. The ability is there for this offense to really get clicking and start to put up big numbers. And this ended a stretch of, they had 4 straight games where they had at least 3 home runs. Now that came after a 3-game stretch where they didn't hit a single home run. So again, it's some of that, up and down, 2 steps forward, 2 steps back kind of thing that we've seen from the Braves this year. But again, we're still hopeful. And again, the talent is still there for this offense to really take off. And you're seeing some good signs from people like a Sean Murphy, like an Orlando Arcia. Mm-hmm. You throw a Solair into that, and suddenly this offense starts to look like what we thought it could be.
Yeah, and an odd thing about the 4 straight games with 3 or more home runs, they only won 2 of those 4 games. So again, you want those home runs to come with as many guys on base as possible. That can make a pretty big impact on what's going on a given night. We got a lot more to talk about here, though, on the Braves postcast. We'll continue on, talk more about the start of Bryce Elder, give you those injury updates, of course, on Max Fried and Reynaldo Lopez, both of the positive variety, and, of course, unpack the trade deadline and the deal for Jorge Solair and Luke Jackson. All of that is coming your way as the Braves postcast continues. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands. Get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, you can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free TradeMaster program. Every TradeMaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the tens of thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free memberships at SupplyHouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Jake, let's look at the box score and the line score from this game for the Braves, who improved to 57-49 with their victory. They had 5 runs on 14 hits, no errors, 11 men left on base for Atlanta. Run on just 6 hits, no errors, and 7 men left aboard for the Brewers, who are now 61-46 on the season. Bryce Elder picking up the win in this one. Joe Ross takes the defeat in this game as well. We'll talk about the offense, of course, because it's a nice night when you've got 14 hits to talk a little bit more about that. But I did want to get back to Bryce Elder. 6 1/3 innings, 5 hits, 1 run. That was actually an inherited run that was scored after he left the game. 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. I know it's been an up and down season for him, literally and figuratively. We just talked about maybe some of the reasons why. But I do think this was a reminder of the fact that every once in a while, you're going to see the best of Bryce Elder, as well as we've seen maybe the worst from time to time. If he can figure out a way to split the difference, I think the Braves could benefit from him being one of those guys that helps them keep their rotation on track and gassed up and ready to go come October.
Yeah, certainly would love to see that from Elder. You're kind of looking for that guy, really honestly, a 6th guy to kind of help you give some rest to these other starters down the stretch. And hopefully that can be Bryce Elder, and certainly starts like this are going to give him more opportunities. What I like about this one, and this really, I think, speaks more to Sean Murphy, but you saw him really lean into the sinker and slider in this one. And what I've really noticed with Murphy when he's catching games lately, whether it be Schwellenbach and his great start last Saturday or what he was doing with Grant Holmes on Monday night, when he sees something working with a pitcher, he just continues to call it. I saw it with Grant Holmes on Monday night where that curveball was working and he just kept calling it until you see the hitter adjust. Just let him keep throwing it. And I saw it in this start too with Bryce Elder, where that slider was working for him, and it's obviously his best pitch. Keep going to it, keep throwing it. So a lot of credit to Sean Murphy, and I think he's done a great job calling some games here lately. But Bryce Elder, again, that sinker slider combination can be so deadly, especially facing right-handed pitchers. And I thought, he did a really good job with that slider. Like I said, his best pitch, 7 whiffs on 19 swings. He had 13 whiffs overall on the night. Really didn't have to throw his changeup and four-seamer much. Like I said, just relying on that sinker and slider. He has such good, when he's on with that sinker, he has such good command with it, being able to run it in off the plate to righties, locating it inside to lefties and keeping it down in the zone to get those ground balls. 7 ground outs to just 2 flyouts. That's exactly what you want with Bryce Elder. So again, this is the good version of Bryce Elder. It's the version we saw for the first half of last season. And I think he's capable of doing more of this. I think he just needs more confidence. Obviously, needs more opportunities, but this is what he can do for you.
Yeah, I mean, more than a solid start from Bryce Elder this time out. We've talked about, trades going on across baseball. The Braves did not go out and get a starting pitcher, but if some of these others can just give you that quality start, it does not have to be, 6 or 7 innings of 1-run ball every time. You'll take it every time you can get it, but you'd feel better about your depth if you were getting that. And I think that obviously Elder, AJ Smith-Shawver, Ian Anderson, and others could be players in this as the Braves look to utilize that depth and supplement their rotation. Of course, and we'll get into this more later, positive news for Max Fried and for Reynaldo Lopez, both of whom could be cleared to return as soon as this weekend. Fried from the injured list, Lopez without perhaps missing a start. We'll see how he responds, but either way, the Braves felt good enough about it where they didn't have to go out and, like you said, out of need or desperation, go out and make a trade that might have been an overpay for an underwhelming return when it comes to a starting pitcher that may not necessarily be altogether that much of an upgrade over what you already have in your system, as odd as that may be to say. And then throwing all of that out here, Jake, we are talking about a club that has given up the fewest runs in the National League, if not all of baseball, depending on which day and what the Seattle Mariners have done. This has overall been a very good pitching squad. You're just going to have some of those bad nights every once in a while, but the entirety of the work, the full body of work for the Braves pitching staff has been quite impressive.
Yeah, it's been what's carried this team this year. And look, if you keep everybody healthy, this is a very good rotation. The only reason you go out and make a move for a starter is just to get some depth. You look at what's happened the last 2 years. They've gone into the postseason with some pitchers banged up, and that's cost them. So look, if everybody's healthy and you get good reports on Lopez and Fried, great. But the only real need to go out and get a starter was just to add some depth. But you do have that, like you mentioned, in the case of the farm system with Smith-Shawver, with Waldrop, and with Elder. And I want to make one more point on Elder because something you brought up kind of hinted or led me to this. When Elder's on, I feel like you get these starts. And I feel like you can say that about a lot of pitchers. The problem with Elder was that when he gets in trouble, and maybe a night where he doesn't have it, it's 4+ innings and 4 or 5 runs. He doesn't always have that ability like some other pitchers where he doesn't have his best stuff, to grind through 6 innings of 3 earned. So if he can get, over that hurdle on these nights where maybe he just isn't quite as crisp, to be able to give you 5-6 innings and keep it, at 3 runs, that's really, I think, the next step for Bryce Elder. It seems to be one or the other. Either he's really good like this, or he's not able to get through 5 and he's given up 4 or 5 runs.
Yeah, the split and the difference thing could be a big deal for him. And also the margin for error for a pitcher like Bryce Elder is altogether different than a Chris Sale or somebody that has the strikeout stuff that, yeah, maybe they get in a little bit of trouble early, but they do that damage control and then they get locked in. Plus, they're going to get a lot of swing and miss. That's not necessarily Bryce Elder's game. As you mentioned, if he can keep it on the ground, he's pretty much doing his job, and he did his job on this night. The Braves didn't have their shiny new / old toy Jorge Solair back just yet, but they went to work for this early lead, a 4 spot in the 3rd inning, a solo homer, then followed in the 4th inning for Jarred Kelenic as the Braves piled up 5 runs in the first half of this game. How about Orlando Arcia? We got to talk about him a little bit. He's quietly put together a 10-game hitting streak, and I guess you can just file this under every little bit helps, because I know he's caught a lot of flack in some circles just based on offensively having an underwhelming year. But as I've said before, and I'll say again, if the rest of this offense is doing the things it's capable of, and maybe you're not facing a season where you don't have Ronald Acuna Jr., Michael Harris, Ozzie Albies, Sean Murphy for long periods of time, I don't know how many people would have been pointing at Orlando Arcia and wanting it to turn things around as quickly or as extremely as he possibly could. Usually he's just kind of part of the ensemble, not necessarily a featured bat, but great to see him swinging it well there at the bottom of the order.
Yeah, great job for Arcia, who, again, struggled, and he's hearing it. He's seeing the comments and the fact that he's just hasn't been getting it done offensively. And look, we've said it on here before. If he's batting 8th or 9th in your lineup, everybody else doing what they're supposed to, maybe there's not as much focus. But even that, I mean, he has been really, really bad. There's no getting around that. Even for a guy that's batting 8th or 9th, he's been really, really bad offensively, to the point where maybe his defense hasn't quite outweighed how bad he's been offensively. But this is a good stretch for Orlando Arcia, and you're starting to see signs of him, being able to shoot the ball the other way, making some hard contact. He had 3 hard hit balls tonight to go along with those 2 hits. So again, he's a better hitter than he's shown. We know that, and aren't looking for much for Orlando Arcia. Just looking for him to be, close to league average as a hitter, just with the defense that he brings you. So if he can get back to doing that, and like I said, hitting at the bottom of the order, you get Solair in here, I think you'd be a real asset to help flip the lineup.
Yeah, Braves, meanwhile, got 2 hits and 2 walks from Jarred Kelenic at the top of the order. Austin Riley, a 4-hit game. We're not getting that or to that until about 20 minutes in here, but it's not for lack of noticing that everybody in the lineup reached base at least once. Everyone in the starting lineup, that is, had at least 1 hit except for Matt Olson, who walked 2 times. Walks are good to see from Matt Olson as well. We don't have a lot of time left in this segment, but Jake, we talked about wanting to see signs from Matt Olson. It's not just the power that disappeared for him. It's also been his ability to take walks, which was part of his profile when everything is going well for him.
Yeah, it's been a curious thing for Matt Olson because, as you said, the on-base ability for him has always been there. You've always expected the walks, the home runs. You've expected the strikeouts too. But when you've been getting only the strikeouts and not much of the home runs and walks, it leads to the season that Matt Olson's having. So good to see that. Austin Riley, good to see him with a 4-hit night, 4 hard hit balls. He's been batting under 200 since the All-Star break. Of course, he did have a kid in the middle of that. And as somebody who has 3 kids, I know you don't get much sleep and all of that. But good to see him with a 4-hit night.
Well, as somebody who has 3 dogs, sometimes you don't get a lot of sleep at night. But either way, of course, congratulations to the Riley family, which continues growing. But obviously great to see him get things rolling here in this 5-1 win over the Brewers. We got more to talk about as we continue on the Braves postcast, the Solair-Jackson trade. We got to get back to that. Of course, we'll talk more about Max Fried and Reynaldo Lopez. The good news for those 2 guys, and get you set for the series finale as Chris Sale will be on the mound. The Braves will try to take 2 out of 3 from the first place Brewers. All of that is coming your way on the Braves postcast. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. PrizePicks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and right here in Georgia. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, on the PrizePicks app, and you'll get a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. Game 3 is coming our way on Wednesday as the Braves will look to take 2 out of 3 from the Milwaukee Brewers before they come home to see something I'll call the new look Miami Marlins, which will be happening at Truist Park over the weekend. They, of course, the Marlins, were busy selling off more than a few pieces, headlined by Jazz Chisholm getting traded leading up to the deadline. And man, he has probably made his presence known and has become very popular in a very short amount of time in the Bronx. But since this is not the Yankees postcast, we'll get back to what we're talking about here, which, of course, is what the Braves did on the trade deadline and what the Braves are looking to do on Wednesday. Jorge Solair signed a 3-year deal with the San Francisco Giants. He's on his way back to Atlanta, though. At the trade deadline of the very first year, the Giants kind of did this half-in, half-out thing, I feel like, with what they were doing. They did not end up trading away Blake Snell. They basically said it was going to be very difficult to pry him away. So that was kind of an interesting strategy for San Francisco. They sold on Solair. They did go out and do a little bit more buying here or there, but nothing substantial. And then, of course, you get Luke Jackson back in this trade as well. Tyler Matzik heads the other way. He, of course, a postseason hero alongside Jorge Solair in 2021. Luke Jackson, a big part of the Braves 2021 squad that won the World Series. This was the one big move for Atlanta. I thought maybe you look for another infielder if you can find one. Of course, we haven't seen very much of Whit Merrifield yet. I'm not saying that he is going to come in and, blow the doors off the situation at second base, but could be a bit of an upgrade. So I guess you kind of have to throw him into what the Braves were trying to accomplish by the time you got to the end of July. They have brought in a few veterans, but none more important than what Solair means for this club.
Yeah, obviously, Solair's the big ticket item here. He's the only ticket item here. Luke Jackson, we'll see what kind of role he plays in this bullpen, but Solair is the one that you're looking at that can come in and have the biggest impact. I mean, he's going to come in and bat leadoff right away for this team. So that's the guy that you're really hoping can get the offense going and that big acquisition that you're hoping for. We talked about it. I thought maybe they'd go out and get another bat, somebody that could play, infield, outfield, Rengifo, somebody from the Angels really talked about. He ended up not getting moved. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa did get moved, kind of fits that mold as well. But again, maybe the Braves are hoping that it's going to be Whit Merrifield. And look, you are going to get Ozzie Albies back, hopefully at some point. It might be very late in the season, so it's hard to go all in and say, let's go get that second baseman. Brandon Lowe with the Rays, who were selling off everything, was another name that was mentioned. But you are, still hopeful to get Ozzie Albies back this season. So maybe you just try to patchwork that until it happens. We talked about the idea of maybe needing another arm, but maybe with the good news that you had with Fried and Lopez, maybe lessen that as a priority, plus with the prices that were out there. And this bullpen is solid. Look, most teams, contenders, are looking to add bullpen, and those prices were high as well. Yeah. But the Braves were already set there, so they didn't really have to worry too much about that. So in the end, as a fan, it's a bit of a disappointing deadline. I wanted to see more. Obviously, I was looking for the Crochets and some of the bigger names out there. But, you do get Solair. I do think he's going to help a lot with this offense going forward.
Yeah, it was a fit that makes sense for the Braves, most certainly. Some interesting things Alex Anthopoulos said in his trade deadline availability was that Ozzie Albies is trending maybe for an earlier September return. Of course, we're still a ways away from that, but if they can get him back sooner than later, that would certainly be a very nice little bonus for the Braves. And while I think Brandon Lowe would have been a lot of fun to bring over from the Tampa Bay Rays, who were some of the biggest sellers at the trade deadline, that did not end up coming to pass. A couple of interesting notes on Jorge Solair, some stats I posted on formerly known as Twitter, now called X, for those of you who are keeping score there. Encouraging trends for returning Braves slugger Jorge Solair, who will serve as Atlanta's leadoff man in the second half, batting .359 with a nearly 1,100 OPS thus far, 7 RBI on a couple of home runs, 10 runs scored in 11 games in the second half. So he comes in swinging the bat extremely well. At leadoff this year, he's posted a .380 on base percentage in 28 games for San Francisco. And since June the 1st, batting .280 with a .374 on base, .486 slug over his last 47 games. So while the home runs have not been as plentiful, we all know that Jorge Solair can get on a run and hit quite a few home runs in a very short amount of time. Should be a dynamic bat to put at the top of the order that has been missing a dynamic bat, if I'm remembering correctly, since about May 26th of this year. But an eerily similar set of circumstances as Jorge Solair comes back here in 2024 for round 2 with the Braves. Positive news for the Braves rotation, Max Fried and Reynaldo Lopez. The MRI was clean for Lopez. He's not going on the injured list yet. The Braves are maintaining some optimism that he may not miss a start, could be available this weekend. Max Fried threw a bullpen yesterday. We'll throw another one tomorrow. If all goes well, he could be ready to be activated from the injured list when first eligible on Friday. Those would be a couple of good things for the Braves as well. And it does sound like Whit Merrifield is going to be ready to help out at second base. He had to get stitches for that bizarre play or that bizarre fielding incident that happened prior to his first day with the Braves. Just a strange set of circumstances, but they could have him back in the fray for kind of the first time. I know he did some pinch running the other day, but worth seeing what he can do at second base in the interim, as Nacho Alvarez, who did have a hit on Tuesday, has found those hits rather hard to come by. Now, one guy that you'd love to see on the mound in every single series, were that to be possible, is Chris Sale. He goes in Wednesday's finale. It's game 3, as Sale is 13-3 with a 2.68 ERA. He is going to match up with Freddie Peralta, who is getting the start for the Milwaukee Brewers. This is the rubber match of this series. It'll be happening up in Milwaukee, and the first pitch is set for 2:10 p.m. Eastern time as well. What do you expect to see out of Chris Sale? I'm going to go ahead and go with more of the same. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I would love to see more of the same. Love having Chris Sale on the mound in a rubber match trying to win a series, but hopefully the Braves can get him some runs. They've left him without some run support here lately in some games like this, so want to see that offense continue. But anytime you got Chris Sale going in a series clincher, obviously that you feel pretty good about that. They are going to be against a very good pitcher as well in Freddie Peralta, so a good pitching matchup in this one to close things out, and hopefully the Braves can come away with the series win and get Chris Sale his 14th win of the season. I feel like he's been stuck on 13 for a little bit now.
It does. If he wants to make that run at 20-game winner and be the Braves' third different 20-game winner in 3 years, which I'd have to do a little bit of research. I'm sure that happened in the 1990s, in the early 90s with Glavin, Maddox, and Smoltz, but this would be a very unique trio with Kyle Wright getting it started, Spencer Strider doing it last year, and Chris Sale with the opportunity over the final couple of months to perhaps reach the 20-win plateau. And, oh, by the way, is a Cy Young candidate in the National League as well. It's left-hander Chris Sale against Freddie Peralta, the righty for the Brewers. Wednesday is the Game 3. The Game 3 time is 2:10 p.m. Eastern time. That is the first pitch as the Braves and Brewers will wrap up the series. And Atlanta will come on home and have 4 games against the Miami Marlins waiting for them. That brings us to the end of this edition of the Braves Postcast. As always, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. Leave us those likes and comments. Share the show with a friend and subscribe to Locked On Braves wherever you get your podcast. Braves back in the win column, 5-1 behind Bryce Elder on Tuesday. They'll look for the series win behind Chris Sale on Wednesday. We will be back to talk to you after that game and, of course, throughout the rest of the second half, which now for the not-so-new-look Braves should be pretty interesting with Jorge Solair back in the fray after the trade deadline. Once again, the Braves with a 5-1 win on Tuesday. For Jake Mastroianni, I'm Grant McAuley. We will catch you next time. And until then, so long, everyone.